I always knew my sister hated me, but I never understood how deep her darkness went. Not until she burned my relationships, poisoned my family against me, and nearly convinced my own mother that I was a monster. So I did the one thing she never saw coming. I peeled back the mask she wore in public and revealed the double life she'd been hiding for years. And the truth? It was darker and more humiliating than even I expected. If you've ever dealt with that one toxic family member, the one who smiles in public and destroys you in private, hit that like button, subscribe, and settle in. Because today, I'm telling you the real story of how I finally stopped running, finally stopped apologizing, and finally took my power back. You know, it took me years to admit that my sister wasn't just difficult. She wasn't misunderstood, or emotional, or overprotective. She was a narcissist in the purest form. The kind who smiles sweetly to strangers while twisting the knife behind closed doors. Growing up, I learned early that her jealousy wasn't harmless. It wasn't sibling rivalry. It was calculated, persistent, and cruel. At first it started small. Little lies, subtle manipulations, comments that made me look irresponsible or immature. But as we grew older, her tactics evolved from petty sibling drama into a full-blown psychological warfare campaign. And the craziest part? She did it all with a calm smile, as if she truly believed she was the perfect one, born to be admired, respected, and worshipped. Meanwhile, I was the brother she saw as competition, a threat, an inconvenience, her favorite punching bag. But it wasn't until I hit my 20s that I realized she wasn't just sabotaging me. She was rewriting the story of my life in the minds of the people I loved. The slow poison. My first serious girlfriend came when I was around 19. A sweet girl, kind, soft-spoken, a girl who didn't deserve to be dragged through the mud. Yet within weeks of us dating, my sister began sowing seeds of doubt. She told me, "You're talking to other girls," she whispered to my mother. She said, "He's always texting someone. You should warn her before she gets hurt." To my girlfriend, she said, "I just think you should know he's different with other girls. I don't want you to be blindsided." It was subtle enough to sound like concern, but sharp enough to make damage. Arguments started. Suspicion grew. Little cracks formed. And my sister watched it all with that smug, self-satisfied expression. The look of someone who enjoys the chaos she creates. It didn't stop there. Every girlfriend after that suffered the same fate. "She's cheating on you. He's cheating on you." She said a guy from her job asked her out. He flirted with a woman in a store. It didn't matter what the truth was. If she didn't say the full lie, she implied it. She was a master of suggestion, letting her victims fill in their own blanks. And the worst part? My mother believed her every time. The damage at home. My mother, God, she wasn't a bad person. Just gullible, eager to avoid conflict, eager to trust the daughter who smiled sweetly and spoke softly. And over the years, my sister worked on her like water eroding stone. She's not right for him. He's hiding things. He lies. He manipulates. Projection at its finest. A narcissist accusing everyone else of her own sins. Eventually, my mother couldn't see me without seeing the version of me my sister invented. Distrust, suspicion, distance. Felt like coming home only to find the locks changed. Even when I tried to defend myself, calmly, rationally, with proof, my mother shook her head. Honey, she wouldn't lie about something like that. Oh, but she would. She absolutely would. She thrived on the power, the control, the attention. Every problem she caused, she could then swoop in and fix, earning sympathy and admiration from the very people she manipulated. The false accusation. Years later, long after that first girlfriend, long after dozens of lies and manipulations, I discovered something that broke me in a different way. A close family friend pulled me aside one afternoon and said, quietly, "Did you ever make a move on your sister's friend?" Back then, I froze. "What? No, never." He nodded slowly. "Well, she told some people you did. Just thought you should know." I stood there, stunned. It was one thing to poison relationships, to spread rumors about girlfriends, to pit family members against each other. But accusing your own brother of trying to be intimate with your friend? That crossed a line I didn't even know existed. It was disgusting, cruel, and to her completely effortless. I realized she wasn't just jealous. She wanted to destroy my reputation, erase my credibility, make sure nobody ever trusted me more than they trusted her. Even now, when I look back, that was the moment something inside me hardened permanently. A quiet shift, a silent vow. If she wanted war, she'd get war. The night of the DVD, there was one moment, one strange, chaotic, ridiculous moment, where I saw her mask slip, even if only for a second. We had a family meal. Everyone was there, kids, adults, relatives from out of town. It was a rare moment of peace. Her boyfriend proudly brought a DVD he made, a picture book of moments from their trips. He wanted to play it on the TV. He smiled as he put the disc in. The room quieted. Everyone leaned forward. The screen faded from black and BAM. A black guy receiving a blowjob from a white woman. Full screen, center frame, no warning. Silence, then chaos. Her boyfriend scrambled like his life depended on it, slamming buttons, nearly ripping the DVD player out of the wall. My niece gasped. My mother blinked in shock before covering her mouth, half laughing from the absurdity. And my sister? Her face went white. Humiliation radiated off her in waves. But here's the thing. I didn't say a word, not even a smirk, because I knew this embarrassment wasn't the result of a simple mistake. There was a story behind that DVD, a story she never wanted told, and she felt cornered, panicked, vulnerable. So what did she do? The same thing she always did. A few days later, she told my mother it was my DVD, that I somehow slipped porn into the stack to humiliate her in front of family. Couldn't believe it. But my mother, she hesitated, unsure, uncomfortable, and I realized then, if someone doesn't stop her, she'll rewrite reality itself. I wanted to be better than her. I really did. But there's a point when someone has been erasing you for years, when they've convinced the people you love that your version of reality is the lie, that a different kind of anger takes over. Not the small, reactive anger that flares and fades. Something deeper. A slow, molten resentment that pools and sets like concrete. It was late. I remember the night like it was burned into my retinas. Rain on the window, that half-light when the world looks tired and raw. I was sitting at my old desk, one of those IKEA things that wobble if you lean too hard, staring at my monitor. The glow of the screen felt almost aggressive, like it was daring me to do something. It wasn't rational. I knew it wasn't moral. I knew what I was about to do crossed lines you tell yourself you never will cross. But there's a clarity that comes from being pushed into a corner for so long. Clarity that turns survival instinct into a plan. Enough, I whispered to the empty room. I didn't imagine a public confrontation. I didn't think about lawsuits or police reports. I didn't want spectacle. I wanted a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. I wanted truth to cut through the fog she'd built around her. And that's when I thought about the internet. Not the polished platforms we live on now. This was the early days. AOL, MSN Messenger, simple email accounts that felt private because they were old-fashioned. Back then, accounts were like diaries with flimsy locks. If you knew how to look, you could find things people had never imagined being exposed. I'm not going to give you a lesson on how to do anything. That's not the point. The point is this: I decided to see, to read, to know. If she had been playing a double game, I wanted the receipts. I was a kid of the internet era, curious enough to learn, stubborn enough to teach myself. I taught myself enough to poke holes. Not for fame, not for money, for truth. The first thing I did felt petty and ridiculous and delicious all at once. Her eBay account. Why eBay? Because she loved flaunting little trophies. Clothes, accessories, trinkets. Always posting photos as if to say, "Look at me. Look how perfect my life is." If she was funding any of that with other people, well, that would say something. I bought something under her account. Not expensive. Stupid, juvenile. A few sex toys. bought, left abusive negative feedback, that absurd, childish jab that would register as harassment on the platform. I didn't pay for it. It was the kind of move that, in the early days, could cause enough of a cluster to get an account flagged and disputed. Call it a test. Call it a sandbox gloat. Part of me expected immediate guilt. Instead, I felt a sharp, animal thrill. I had done something clandestine, and for once, the adrenaline wasn't from a family fight. It was from a secret I carried alone. I slept badly that night, heart thudding under the covers, mind buzzing with possibility. That lead me deeper. Hotmail, MSN. Old school email that people used for everything, private communications, invites, do not share notes. There was no grand plan. It was curiosity opening a door into a house you never should have gone into. But once I was inside, the floorboards creaked with consequence. And then jackpot. The inbox was a time capsule full of things that did not belong in my sister's perfect narrative. Subject lines with names I knew only in passing. Messages with coy language. Invitations to places I'd only heard rumors about. Swinging clubs, private nights, play parties tucked in hotel basements and locked rooms. Photos, snapshots, not artful photos, raw personal images. Faces, bed sheets, laughter frozen in pixels. I remember my head tilting, the air gone thin. My fingers hovered over the mouse like a guilty conspirator. A slow nausea spread through me that tasted like betrayal and vindication at the same time. She had constructed this moral stage in public, playing the outraged righteous woman, the guardian of decency, the sister who would never stoop to that. She'd lectured people about values while carrying receipts proving the opposite. The emotions were messy. I wasn't outraged at consensual adult choices. Let's be clear about that. I don't care what adults do in private. What made my blood boil was the hypocrisy, the performance, the lying, the way she used other people, men she slept with, friends she told half-truths to build an image while simultaneously burning the people who loved me. And there it was, the moral permission I never expected to get from myself. If she was going to ruin lives while pretending to be untouchable, then she had to answer for it. Not in courtrooms, not in revenge porn nonsense, but in the simplest, oldest human currency, truth. I printed nothing. I didn't scream. I didn't broadcast. I simply coldly forwarded. Not a few messages. Not a whisper. I sent entire threads to everyone in her contacts list. Family, relatives, colleagues, aunts and uncles who'd always admired her, and some people I knew would be blindsided. People who had no idea that their friend or cousin was moonlighting in a lifestyle she never admitted to. The first time I hit send, it felt obscene. The second time, purpose gave it weight. The third time, it felt like taking off a mask while someone watched in slow motion. Later, when I tried to explain why I did it, I would say it was about justice. About dismantling a lie that had been used as a weapon against me. In that moment, it felt more like loathing. It felt like cold, precise exorcism, ridding the family of the poison by exposing its source. What happened next? Chaos. Predictable, searing, immediate chaos. Phones rang like hail. My mother called me, voice brittle. Why would she do this? Cousins texted screenshots. My aunt, the one who'd always trusted my sister, messaged in a trembling voice. Is this real? Are we safe? My sister, when she figured it out, went nuclear. I can still see her face when she called me. A mask of fury so bright it was almost comical. You had no right, she spat between clenched teeth. You ruined me. You did this on purpose. I said nothing at first. Her words slid off something that had hardened inside me. But then my voice came soft and measured. You ruined us for years. She laughed. A sharp, brittle sound, and threatened police. I will call the cops. This is harassment. Identity theft. You'll regret this. Maybe she would have. Maybe I'd crossed a line that would come back to haunt me. But for the first time in my life, I felt a strange, steady relief. For years, I had been gaslighted and belittled and turned into a villain in my own home. For years, I had swallowed accusations and watched relationships crumble. That night, the roles shifted. I was no longer the one hiding. I was the one holding the flashlight. Of course, There were consequences I didn't fully anticipate. People I thought would understand got furious at me. Some relatives called me cruel, reckless, immoral. My mother, confused, ashamed, retreated into silence for days. Friends who'd once been loyal asked why I didn't come to them first. I tried to explain who she had been, how she'd whispered poison into ears for the sake of drama and control. It sounded defensive. It sounded like jealousy. There's a terrible loneliness that comes with exposing a truth no one wants to hear. Some people choose denial because the alternative is humiliating. The truth cut and blood came, but other things happened too. Men who had fed her little luxuries suddenly found themselves embarrassed, apologetic. Some contacts turned cold. Invitations stopped. The carefully curated illusion my sister had relied on began to crack in the light. I didn't feel triumphant. Not really. There was a vacuous spot in my chest. An absence that satisfaction should have filled but didn't. Instead, there was a strange, reflective quiet. I had done something irrevocable. I had burned a bridge that, frankly, I had wanted to burn for years. But once you light that kind of fire, the smoke gets everywhere. And she doubled down. She played the victim to anyone who would listen. She cried at family gatherings, eyes wide and wounded. She accused me of harassment and betrayal. She painted me the villain again. Only this time, she had blood on her own hands. For a while, the family fractured into sides. Those who wanted to protect her, those who wanted to hear the truth, and those who just wanted nothing to do with the drama. I sat alone sometimes and thought about the person I'd been before this, before the hacking, before the forwarding, before the utter dismantling of a life I'd known backwards and forwards. Would I do it again? The answer came not as a shouted confession, but as a quiet, resigned nod to myself. Yes, because something inside me had shifted from the passive tolerance of abuse to active reclamation. I had stepped out of her shadow, even if what I'd done to do it was messy, illegal, and imperfect. That night I slept, finally, for the first time in years without waking from nightmares of whispered lies and a mother's hollow stare. The relief wasn't clean. It smelled like smoke and old coffee and something like freedom, bitter, complicated, and not without cost. The days after the emails went out felt like living in the eye of a hurricane. Temporary calm surrounded by chaos you could feel in your bones. Everywhere I went, conversations ended abruptly. Phone calls stopped. Silence grew teeth. Then the storm moved again. 3 days after the exposure, I came home to find my mother sitting on the edge of the couch with her hands clasped tightly together. She wasn't crying. She wasn't yelling. Just staring at the floor like it had personally betrayed her. "Sit," she said softly. My stomach twisted. Those conversations never meant anything good. "I talked to your sister today." Of course she had. "She's very upset." Upset? For a moment the word felt laughable. Upset was losing your keys. Upset was burning dinner. What my sister felt was nuclear humiliation. My mother lifted her eyes to mine. I recognized the look, half confusion, half fear, like she couldn't figure out whether I was the son she raised or the monster my sister painted me to be. "She said you hacked her privacy," she whispered. "She said you stole things. She said you sabotaged her eBay account." I didn't speak. My jaw clenched so tightly it throbbed. All the lies my sister had fed her for years had made a nest in her brain, and the truth was struggling to breathe. "She told me you've always been angry, manipulative, dishonest." There it was, the word again. Manipulative. Projection so blatant it almost glittered. My mother's voice cracked. "I just want this family to be normal." Normal. As if that was ever on the table with someone like my sister in the mix. I leaned forward slowly. "Mom, everything she accused me of is what she's been doing to us for years." But she shook her head with a sad, weary smile. She wouldn't lie about something this big. And there it was, the invisible wall I had been punching for my entire life. My mother believed the performance more than the evidence. She preferred her daughter's illusion over my truth. She chose the mask over the man. The enormity of that realization settled into my bones like cold water. My sister hadn't just manipulated relationships. She had twisted my mother's instincts, rewired them, gaslit her so thoroughly that even when the truth glared, she blinked and looked away. It wasn't my mother's fault. Not entirely. Narcissists pick their victims like surgeons choose organs, carefully, precisely, targeting the vulnerabilities that give them the most control. And my mother's vulnerability? Love. Blind, unconditional, eager to please love. The retaliation. My sister didn't retreat. She doubled down. I received my first official-sounding message 2 days later. A dramatic email threatening legal action, cybercrime reports, defamation lawsuits, and all sorts of wonderfully theatrical language that sounded like it was pulled from a Facebook argument rather than a lawyer's office. You will be arrested. You will go to jail for this. You have ruined my life. Now I'll ruin yours. Not one message acknowledged the swing club photos, the secret meetings, the hotel rendezvous, or the endless lies she'd spun for years. She wasn't angry I uncovered the truth. She was angry I interrupted the story she wrote about herself. One where she was virtuous, flawless, victimized, and adored. Now people knew the truth. And the truth scorched her ego worse than any punishment I could have devised. I ignored the messages, but she didn't stop. The family divides. At a family gathering the following weekend, she arrived early. Smiling sweetly, hair curled, outfit carefully chosen to appear delicate and wounded. The picture of innocence. She circulated quietly, whispering to anyone who would listen. I watched from across the room, back pressed against the wall, arms crossed. My uncle shot me a look of barely masked disappointment. My aunt glared outright. My cousin avoided eye contact. They weren't reacting to the truth. They were reacting to the performance. Then, icing on the cake, my sister walked right up to me in front of everyone with a trembling lip and whispered just loud enough. I know what's wrong with you. You're a narcissist. That's why you did this. I almost laughed. Me? The one who never wanted attention? The one who stayed quiet while she lit fires and then blamed me? The one who didn't run to every relative screaming for validation? Classic projection. Like blaming a mirror for the reflection. I said nothing. Silence, I realized, unnerved her more than anger ever could. She needed me shouting, needed me defensive, needed me to react so she could play the victim even harder. When I didn't give her anything, she stepped closer, barely an inch from my face. You think you're better than me? She hissed. You will regret this. I will make sure everyone knows what you are. For the first time, I met her eyes without flinching. I didn't create who you are, I said quietly. I just stopped hiding it. Her face contorted. Rage, shame, disbelief, like a mask melting under heat. She walked away quickly, cheeks burning, hands shaking. She wasn't used to losing control of the narrative, and she hated every second of it. But the rot went deeper. The fallout didn't end with the emails. Because now that I had access to her accounts, I discovered much, much more. Things she'd never admit even on her deathbed. Things that revealed who she really was behind her moral facade. I found conversations with men who sent her expensive gifts in exchange for private time. Trips she lied about, claiming they were girls' weekends when they were essentially paid rendezvous. Receipts that contradicted stories she told the family. Stories she weaponized to turn others against me or my girlfriends. Screenshots where she called my girlfriends sluts, while sleeping with multiple men behind her own husband's back. Messages accusing me of things she knew I didn't do. Messages that painted me as unstable, cheating, manipulative, dangerous. The level of deception was staggering. She had poisoned my reputation so efficiently that even the truth needed CPR to breathe. And yet, something bigger emerged from all this chaos. She wasn't just jealous. She wasn't just narcissistic. She wasn't just petty. She lived a double life so meticulously curated that even she believed it half the time. She told so many lies that she couldn't keep track of them anymore. She'd become trapped in the performance she created. And still, despite everything, she pretended to be the victim. The porn DVD revisionism. If part 1 showed you the infamous DVD moment, part 3 reveals its shadow. because the week after exposing her, I overheard her telling my mother, "Mom, that DVD? That wasn't ours. It was his. He's into disgusting things. He tried to humiliate us." It was the most absurd, laughable, delusional twist. Everyone present knew it was their DVD. Even her boyfriend looked like he wanted to crawl into the drywall. But narcissists don't need lies to be believable. They need lies to be useful. And for her, blaming me was always useful. My mother wavered. For a moment, I saw the old doubt flicker in her eyes. It was then that I realized something vital. My sister wasn't just a liar. She was a reality architect. She bent truth until it snapped. And she expected everyone else to pretend it was still whole. The quiet before the payback. People say revenge is an explosion, flash, a violent end. But real revenge, the kind that brings genuine, shaking relief, it begins quietly, with understanding, with clarity, with a shift inside your soul that whispers, "She has taken enough from you. Now you take something back." I wasn't finished. Not yet. Because exposing her secret life was only the beginning. The real revenge, the one that shattered her facade, destroyed her false moral superiority, and forced her to live with the consequences of her own actions, hadn't even begun. And when it came, she never saw it coming. After the emails and the family fractures, something strange happened. The chaos didn't make me giddy. It made me sober. The anger that had pushed me into motion settled into a cold, methodical pulse. I stopped acting like a cornered animal and started thinking like someone who was planning a surgical removal. I knew two things very clearly. One, exposing her private life had been necessary, but messy and blunt. It had forced the truth into light, but it hadn't delivered the verdict I wanted. Half the family still defended her. Some people called me cruel. Many pretended they hadn't seen the photos they'd received. Truth, I realized, was a weird currency. Easy to spend, hard to make people believe. Two, my sister was a pattern player. She didn't stumble into deception. She choreographed it. If I wanted an ending that felt like justice, I couldn't rely on chaos. I needed a plan the way she had a plan. Precise, inevitable, and impossible to spin away. So I began to collect not revenge, exactly, but clarity that I gathered timelines, contradictions, receipts, messages. Anything that showed the pattern of her lies laid out like a map. Not to humiliate with salacious details, but to show cause and effect. The goal wasn't titillation. It was accountability. I did not want to hurt people gratuitously. I wanted to make sure that when I pulled the thread, the whole weave would unravel, not in rumors, but in concrete, undeniable ways. My sister's weapon had always been narrative. She'd tell a tiny lie and let it mushroom into proof. She'd say I'd done something, and people would accept it because her voice was steady, rehearsed, practiced for sympathy. So I decided to weaponize something she concealed from everyone, her own record. I called it compiling the ledger. It was tedious. Hours of comparing flight receipts to her social posts that said she was with girlfriends. Matching gift receipts to messages where she claimed they were birthday presents from her husband. Noting dates when she told my mother one story while her photos told another. I printed things, no, not the smutty photos. Those were toxic and unnecessary. I printed timelines, annotated conversations, screenshots where she contradicted herself, messages where she thanked men for travels and favors, while telling others she paid for everything. I also did something else, something quieter. I reached out to some of the men she'd been involved with. I approached them not with accusations, but with questions. I'd learned to be careful with tone. Curiosity disarms, confrontation alienates. Many of them were embarrassed. Some apologized. A few were angry. One admitted, over coffee in a crowded cafe, that he had often bought things for her because she'd suggested it might help her with bills. Not all of them were criminals. Most were foolish or selfish. But collectively they formed corroboration that she'd been trading charm for things and secrecy for status. This part felt ugly. I didn't like interrogating grown men in cafes, but it felt necessary. My intention was never to humiliate them. My intention was to show patterns to people who needed to see them. While I compiled the ledger, My sister watched like a cornered beast. She stepped up the theatrics. Tearful calls, dramatic posts on social media about being attacked by a family member, and frantic messages to friends I'd once trusted. Her threats escalated into something more tangible. Legal-sounding letters, talk of police involvement, and a smear campaign aimed at painting me as merciless and vindictive. It was almost laughable except for the part where some people, predictably, took her side. In their mind, I had crossed a line. I could see why. But the difference now was that I wasn't improvising. I was building an architecture of truth that would not rely on people's fleeting sympathies. Then I picked the moment. She had a charity event planned. A small thing, a local charity luncheon she'd used for years as PR. She'd volunteer, speak about family values, smile for the camera, and bask in the afterglow of applause. For her, that event was a stage. For others, it was a chance to see her perform good works. I knew how much she adored that glow. If she'd been acting saintly in public, the fall would be crueler in front of an audience that believed in the version of her she sold. I secured a seat in the back under a fake name. I brought copies of the ledger, neatly bound, indexed, and annotated. I had 2 friends, quiet, sensible people, who agreed to sit beside me and witness everything, ready to corroborate if needed. No, I didn't interrupt the speech mid-sentence like some movie. That wasn't the point. I let her speak, watched the practiced smile, the soft tones, the hand gestures she used when she wanted pity. I watched the room nod. I watched the camera flash. Afterwards, people milled around with sandwiches and polite applause. She circulated, collecting gratitude like medals. The organizers congratulated her. That's when I moved. I approached the organizer first, a calm, respectable woman who'd run the charity for years. I asked for a private word. I handed her one of the bound ledgers. I told her, simply, that the family values talk everyone enjoyed was coming from someone whose private life contradicted the image she'd presented, and that the charity deserved to know if the person they'd been praising bought that image with lies and deceit. Her face didn't change at first. Then confusion. Then a tightness. Then immediate action. She called the event committee into a side room. I stayed quiet. I let them open the pages. I let the weight of the evidence do its work. Within minutes, a small, stunned conference formed. People read, flipped pages, whispered. One woman exclaimed, "Is this really her?" Another muttered, "I thought she was different." A few went pale. The organizer asked me to step into a private room and explain everything. I told them the truth, calmly, precisely. I didn't sensationalize. I didn't show pictures. I explained the pattern of manipulation, the lies, the paid favors that funded a public persona, the ways she turned private relationships into props. I told them I wanted the charity to make an informed choice about their association with her. I offered the ledger as the basis for their inquiry. They didn't call the police. They didn't scream. They did what organizations do when someone's reputation might damage their mission: an internal review. They told me, softly, that they would suspend her from future events pending an investigation. I left the building with my hands cold and my heart pounding. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't gossiped. I had presented facts. I had given a responsible organization the tools to choose integrity over spectacle. Word spread as it always does. The next morning, a note arrived on my phone. Hundreds of messages, some praising, some condemning, many confused. My sister's social media erupted with anger and staged victimhood. But importantly, the charity issued a tentative statement. An internal review had been opened, and she would be temporarily relieved of her volunteer duties pending the outcome. That temporary word was the first crack that began to widen. The fallout wasn't immediate fireworks. It was a slow erosion. Sponsors who had once loved her began to distance themselves. Invitations dried up. People who'd once sought selfies for exposure stopped answering. I didn't dance on the embers of her ruin. I kept doing the ledger work. I kept collecting. I wanted the end to be absolute in meaning, not cruel in intention. Because revenge, I had learned, isn't a moment. It's a correction. It's making things clear enough that the people who matter can no longer pretend they didn't see. And for her, the The stage lights were dimming. She was frantic, more vicious now that the applause was fading. She threatened me publicly more aggressively, tried to sue, threatened police reports, and painted me as reckless and unstable. I took each blow like a student taking notes. Each threat was filed, catalogued, parsed for patterns of desperation. One night, when the pressure seemed to be closing in, she called my mother sobbing, voice ragged. "They're turning on me, Mom. He's ruined everything." My mother again wavered, but the ledger had already begun seeping into her conscience. Maybe she was tired of choosing the story that made endings simple. Maybe the facts were finally heavier than the niceties of family loyalty. I'm not proud of how I got here. I'm not naive about consequences. But the truth kept clicking into place like a lock finally closing. I had stepped from reaction into agency. And the best part? I felt like myself for the first time in a long time, a person who refused to be gaslit into silence. The climax, the real confrontation, the thing that would make everyone look uncomfortably at the choices they'd made, was coming. I could feel it like a storm front on the horizon. Inevitable, charged, and almost painfully clean. There's a particular kind of silence that happens right before a life comes undone. Not the peaceful silence after a fight, not the numb silence after heartbreak, but the sharp, brittle silence of someone finally running out of places to hide. That silence came for my sister. And it wasn't because of the emails or the charity investigation or the whispers beginning to circle her once perfect image. It was because the people who had always backed her, the ones she counted on to swallow her lies whole, finally had something undeniable to look at. My mother, who had believed her every accusation, who had blamed me for every fight, who had swallowed every whisper like it was gospel. The ledger reached her hands. Not from me. That's what made the moment poetic. It came from the charity organizer who, out of a sense of responsibility, wanted to understand the family dynamic behind everything. She visited my mother, spoke in quiet tones, and without any sensationalism, handed her the bound packet. My mother, tired and embarrassed by years of tears and confusion, took it without argument. Later that night, she called me. No hello, no anger. Just a thin, paper-dry voice that said, "Come over." I found her at the kitchen table, glasses pushed up into her hair, the ledger spread across the wood like a crime scene. She didn't look sad. She didn't look angry. She looked older, as if every lie she'd been fed had finally weighed itself against her heart. "I read everything," she whispered. "All of it." I stood there quietly, unsure whether I was walking into forgiveness or another accusation. "You know," she continued softly, "for years, I thought I was protecting the innocent one." There was a pause. But the innocent one was never her. My chest tightened. Not triumph, not victory, just the quiet ache of getting back something you'd forgotten how to want. My mother's next words were small but sharp. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I didn't realize how badly I needed those 5 words until they landed." She took my hand. "I should have listened. I should have questioned things sooner. I didn't know how much she lied, how much she twisted things to make herself the center." I felt heat rise behind my eyes. Anger, relief, grief, all tangled together. "She came here earlier today," my mother said, voice trembling slightly, "yelling, screaming, saying you were ruining her life, that you'd made everything up. But when I asked her to explain the inconsistencies, she couldn't. She ran out. Of course she did. A narcissist can maintain their illusions only as long as everyone else agrees to pretend. Once someone demands reality, the mask falls, and underneath is nothing but fear. White heavy check mark, the final blow came from someone unexpected. You'd think the climax would be some dramatic showdown. Me and her screaming in public, truth blasting through a megaphone. But the universe, in its strange creativity, delivered justice through someone far closer to her than I was. Her husband. I never thought about him much. He was quiet, soft-spoken, the kind of man who stayed out of drama. He loved my sister blindly, almost painfully. But blind loyalty becomes fragile once you shine enough light on the truth. Apparently, Someone from the charity board contacted him for verification about the hotel trips she'd claimed were work-related. He checked the dates, checked the receipts, checked the bank records. Then he confronted her. I wasn't there for the explosion, but witnesses later told me it was volcanic. She denied. He presented proof. She screamed. He calmly laid out more. She yelled that she was being attacked. He showed screenshots. The facade she'd built, brick by strategic brick, crumbled under the weight of her own contradictions. And then came the sentence that tore her world open. "I think I'm done." Those words shook her more than anything I could have done. He packed a small bag and left the house. He didn't file for divorce immediately. He didn't threaten her. He didn't explode. He did something far worse to a narcissist. He walked away without drama. Nothing wounds a person like her more than quiet, unshakable rejection. White heavy check mark. Her breakdown wasn't loud. It was pitiful. In the days that followed, she spiraled. Not in the dramatic movie sense. There were no grand scenes, no violent confrontations. Just the slow decay of someone whose supply had finally run dry. Her friends stopped answering. The charity suspended her indefinitely. Her husband moved in with his brother. My mother finally saw her without the fog of manipulation. And me? I stayed quiet. Not triumphant. Not gloating. Just done. One night, around 2 a.m., I received one last message from her. A long, incoherent thread of accusations, apologies, insults, pleas, and self-victimizing monologues. It ended with, "One day you'll regret doing this to me." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling absolutely nothing. Then I typed the last thing I would ever say to her. "I didn't do anything to you. I just stopped protecting the lie." And I blocked her, just like that. Years of psychological warfare, dozens of broken relationships, a lifetime of being painted as the villain, ended with a quiet click. White heavy check mark. The true revenge wasn't the exposure. It wasn't the email blast. It wasn't the eBay sabotage. It wasn't the ledger. It wasn't the charity suspension. It wasn't her husband walking away. It was this: people finally saw her. Not her act. Not her costume. Just her. And once they saw the real person behind the mask, they couldn't unsee it. That's what destroyed her. Not my actions, but her truth. Because in the end, the greatest revenge against a narcissist isn't humiliation. It's clarity. The moment people stop believing their lies, their power evaporates. White heavy check mark. Reflective wrap up. When I look back now, I don't feel proud of every choice I made. I crossed lines. I acted from anger. I did things I'd never recommend someone else do. But I also reclaimed something she took from me a long time ago. My voice, my reality, my boundaries, my truth. Some people say revenge is wrong, and maybe they're right. But sometimes, revenge isn't cruelty. Sometimes it's balance being restored. Sometimes, it's the universe handing you the scissors so you can cut the string someone has wrapped around your life for far too long. And sometimes, it's letting the truth finally speak for itself. If the story hit home for you, even a little, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps more than you know. Tell me in the comments, have you ever dealt with someone who tried to rewrite your reality? I read every comment, and your stories matter here. And hey, if you love emotionally charged Reddit revenge stories, the kind with real stakes and real consequences, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because we're just getting started.